Long before modern planning offices and digital maps, African cities already wrote their own urban story. Timbuktu rose with tall modern structures that store heat in the day and cool the night, a living system shaped by climate and crafts. Then, Benin City developed advanced spatial organization and water management that supported dense urban life and strong civic order. Also, the Great Zimbabwe stood with strong walls that reflected engineering skills, social coordination, and environmental awareness. All these ancient cities were not random settlements. They were intelligent cities built on knowledge, memory, and adaptation. Today, many of these practices have faded from formal planning. Now, because breathable materials, floodplains are now are now being turned into paved surfaces, and also heat built in cities that once knew how to found in rural areas. So the question becomes simple and uncomfortable. Why did African cities step away from systems that once worked so well for them? I am Jessica Amarteifio, and I present to you a meta-synthesis on leveraging indigenous knowledge systems for resilient urban governance in various African cities. And this study explores the question, why did African cities step away from systems that once worked so well for them, with a more concise focus on how African knowledge system can still guide modern urban governance. This particular study examines evidence from housing, land management, environmental protection, conflict resolution, and community organization across various African cities. Yeah. So, this study follows a structured meta-synthesis approach, which is guided by the Prisma's principle and grounded in decolonisation theories and Ubuntu philosophy. For nearly 13,000 records from these major academic databases, and after going through the Prisma guidelines, they were and following the inclusion and exclusion criteria, they were now directly they were narrowed down to 27 relevant studies to this particular meta-synthesis that directly addresses indigenous knowledge, urban challenges, and governance responses in Africa. So this is the flow diagram. And we need to understand that the evidence being gathered from the 27 selected studies spans West, East, Southern, and Northern African contexts and reveals consistent patterns when it comes to how local knowledge supports resilience. So these are the studies. And the finding shows that vernacular architecture improves climate adaptation because it responds directly to heat, rainfall, and local materials as well. And we also have customary land systems here, strengthening tenure security and also reduces conflict because it relies on shared rules and community authority, and local environmental practices here also reduce disaster risks, especially when it comes to water management and urban agriculture. But then the same findings also show persistent problems. There are issues when it comes to follow certain policy framework, especially when it comes looking at Nazi et al. Study 2024. His study was explaining how the law is against when it comes to rearing of animals and other growing of crops in urban areas. So we need to understand that actually many cities still continue to remove indigenous materials from construction. They also we have an example here, which is the traditional Guarang house from Ethiopia, and most of the some studies pointed out to the fact that most local actors were excluding most local actors were excluded from planning decision, and they also replaced adaptive systems with very rigid imported models, and this creates heat stress in built environments, and it increases flood risks as well. We need to understand that. So in fact, this study argues that African cities cannot build resilience while ignoring the knowledge system that shaped their earliest urban success. There is therefore the call for planning system that treat indigenous knowledge as valid evidence in policy design and not just a cultural memory on the margins. Yeah. And by appreciating my